Hello, we're starting a couple minutes early and literally no one's on here again yet. So I'm talking to myself. So people who are watching this later, hello, how are you? Number one, what's going on? People who watch this later, we are diving in today to talk about finding your self-love after a breakup in COVID. Now, last week we talked with Paulina Brittner, who was absolutely hilarious, and we kind of talked about the opposite and like finding love in this crazy world. And now we're going to talk about falling out of these relationships. Today we're not just going to talk about romantic relationships, but we're also going to talk about friendships and other relationships that just no longer serve us, and just kind of walking through that bullshit of what finding your self-love during COVID feels like. So I'm going to bring Michaela on right now and we will get started. Hi, everybody. Hello, Paulina. Hello, Brooklyn. If you have any questions for me right now, let me know, or you just want to like say hi, just put a quick comment. Hello, Paulina. All right, I got Coops coming on here. So I'm going to use Michaela and Coops interchangeably, and I'm going to tell you kind of how I know Michaela, tell you why she's so amazing, and then we're going to get into the hard shit. So let's start. So Michaela is one of my bridesmaids, so we've been friends for a super long time. We were friends, we met actually in grade 7, where she like couldn't stop crushing me on the volleyball court because she was a competitor. And then like I dated one of her friends, and like we hated each other in like middle school because like we're girls, we're crazy. And then we became best friends in high school. So Michaela is an award-winning country music artist in Alberta. She's had like three records on the radio. Coops.
Yeah. 3.
So she's super talented. She's always been all over her self-love. She knows exactly what she wants and she always fights for it, and she always tells it as it is. So I'm super excited to have her on today to talk about, losing relationships in COVID. So let's get started, Coops. First question I have for you. How are you?
I'm like a little nervous to do this, but I'm excited. I'm glad that we get to do this today. I know a lot of people are going through different stuff right now. It's not necessarily just like romantic relationship losses, but friendships, family. So I'm glad we can talk about this today.
I love it. And you and I have had this conversation privately quite a few times, and I really wanted to bring it to the public because so many people need to hear this. So first question, Coops, what do you think is so important about finding your self-love in COVID?
Okay, well, I mean, when you asked me to do this, I was like, okay, like self-love, I think we all think, well, I know what self-love is. It's loving myself, but I like looked up the actual definition of self-love, and it's regard for one's own well-being or happiness. So when I read that, I was like thinking more about what is your well-being and what is your happiness, and that could be like food, exercise. It like covers many different categories of things you can do for yourself and have regard for that. Everything you do in life is a reflection of your relationship with yourself. So whether that be relationships with other people or your work, your passions, your family relationships, it all comes back to legitimately how you feel about yourself. So, I mean, can we really pinpoint what's really the most important thing about it? No, because it touches like every single aspect of your life.
And I love what you said, but like, how hard is it to realize that like every shitty thing that goes on in your life is just because you're not vibing with yourself? Like it comes to a point that's a hard realization. So that's pretty cool that you realize that.
Mm-hmm. So then it goes down the rabbit hole from there.
I love it. All right. Okay, so self-love, totally. I totally agree. It's all about all different kinds of aspects, but it's about putting yourself and your needs first so that you can in turn help people around you. And people think that kind of goes like, oh, relationship will change me, but the only relationship that will actually change you is the relationship you have with yourself. So I love that you touch on that. And now let's get into the the other relationship stuff. So how do you think, like, in your perspective, because again, I've been like married for basically 5 years, so I don't know, I kind of, as much as I remember what it feels like, I haven't been in it, and you're fucking in it. And thank you again for being so vulnerable, because that is super hard, but I'm so proud of you. Anyway.
Yes, no, one of my strong suits.
What do you think, like, how do you think relationships can either hinder or help your self-love?
Well, back to that, it is based off of everything. I think ways that relationships can like hinder your self-love is if you are not in touch with yourself, say it is yourself or your partner, and you have a low self-esteem, this leads to like a wreck. So you're not going to show up for yourself. It also means you're not going to show up for your partner. You're not going to show up for your friends. You're not going to show up for your family. You're not going to show up for literally anything in your life if you have a low self-esteem. And low self-esteem and like not loving yourself, I also feel like that almost leads to like a self-sabotaging nature, but also external validation. So if you are in a relationship where yourself or your partner is looking for external validation, it's never going to work. You are responsible for yourself, your own happiness. You are not responsible for your partner's happiness, your friend's happiness, your family's happiness. That's your own thing to own. So like, and then it goes out the other way. Say you're in a very stable relationship or a stable friendship where they're responsible for themselves, their actions, their self-love. That's going to give you room to grow with that person without outgrowing them. So
I love it.
hand in hand.
And that's the thing. I think of so many women in particular where we're raised to be people pleasers, right? We're raised
Yeah.
to, how can I make sure that I'm sexy for other people? How can I make sure that I don't make other people feel uncomfortable? How do I make sure that I'm like what society wants? And in doing that, we look around and we're like, we don't even know what we want. So like you said, we look for this external validation because our society has told us that's the only way that we can be validated. If we fit a certain size, if we are in a certain relationship, if we do that, it's kind of those different kind of things that are really important to society. That's what self-love sounds like. However, when you're in it and you're going through shit, you have to look at yourself intrinsically. You realize it's all about the relationship with yourself. So I love that you touch on that. Love
Yeah.
it. Okay. Let's go. What is the hardest part about a breakup in COVID? And again, there's so many people out here who I know are going to watch this and are going through the same thing. And I don't just mean, romantic relationships. We're going to kind of talk about both, but I also mean just relationship with friends and families. Like, what is the hardest part about going through it in COVID?
Okay. Tough question because there's
No.
so many things, but um, I'd say it's like just like the loneliness of it. I think it's like when you lose like a romantic relationship, you miss like the partnership and like the routine. And like, I know speaking for myself, like I had a lot of things change in like a short amount of time. Like not only did I lose like a romantic relationship, but also like a friendship. And then I also had the death of like a really close family member. And then I go back to work the very next day and I don't even know if I'm going to have a job the next day. So it's like there's so many things that are hard right now. But I think when you're looking at it, it's like the lows will always match the highs. Like they always will. Highs are temporary, like lows are also temporary. But I think if like I'm being honest with myself, it's definitely just sitting with the emotion and like the thought. We're not in a place where like, you know us, where we'd be like, we're getting on a plane tomorrow and we're going to Vegas and like we're gonna fuck shit up and like shit's gonna be crazy. I'm gonna be blackout drunk, like not even giving a flying shit, finding somebody else, moving on that way. I think it's really hard when you have to like actually look at yourself and you have the time to think, why am I hurting this way? Like, how have I been hurting other people? It's like that's like the hardest part for me is it's like there's almost no escape from your thoughts in COVID, I guess.
Yeah, and there's no guideline, right? So like typically you watch all the movies and when girls get broken up with, like all your friends come over and you have like ice cream and then we're all like, we're going to the bar and talking to cute guys or girls, whatever we feel like that night. And like we're gonna, we're gonna just like kind of hide our emotions with external factors, which then goes back to what you first said, what self-love is, right? I think before COVID, we were able to do that. We were able to hide with external factors. But now, like you're being forced to sit with yourself and sit with your emotions, which is awful. But it's also on the other hand, like this is the time that you're going to grow so much because of it, because like you're forced to, which sucks. So like how much it sucks. So like, let's be honest, as much as we're trying to like, look at the positives, like this fucking sucks and it hurts. and it's not fun.
Yeah. Yeah, like I know we touched briefly on a walk the other day that like ignorance is bliss. You when we were younger and you just have no self-awareness and you're like, "Oh, we broke up. Like he's a dick. Like he did me wrong, whatever." Or like or vice versa and you're like, "I really don't care how I affected that person." And like now that we're like a bit older and we're a bit more in touch with ourselves and you know these things and you see your toxic traits and you see these cycles that you repeat, it's like it's a lot, it's overwhelming. And like if COVID's done anything, I feel like it's done that for me in a way, like, and not just in a romantic relationship sense, like in friendships also. Like I've really had to like look at things and be like, this no longer serves me. And like I said, it's my responsibility to, it's my life. I have to like own up to where I've hurt people, where they're hurting me, and like make that change if that's what is necessary, really. Like, or you're just gonna stay, you're gonna keep doing this unless you actively decide to change it. So
I can't agree more. And that's again like the hardest part about this is that we're not ignorant anymore. And COVID is forcing us to look at ourselves way more than we ever did. Because like before, you and I and a lot of other people, I'm guessing most people, like I had my weekends and your weekends were planned like 4 months out. Like I was like, oh, I know what I'm doing 5 weekends from now. I'm going to this event and then I'm going to see these people. And then you can't. And the hardest part with you is now you're being asked to like not only do what other people are doing, but also change up your entire perception and change up your entire way you look at yourself. So that's fucking hard. Like, and like if everybody out there who's going through this, like Michaela's being so vulnerable, and just know that you're not alone. Like this sucks and you're allowed to have it suck. However, you know, you do kind of have to look intrinsically, and that hurts.
Yeah. I mean, like it's overwhelming when you really get into the shit of your own self and your own head and heart and hurt. And then you start to look at, you know, what's happened in the past and what you keep leaning on almost as a crutch in a way. And you're like, I am repeating cycles here because I haven't taken the time to break it. So,
right. And like the amount of times that I would repeat the same cycle over and over and over again. And then I genuinely was like, because of the ignorance, I was like, oh, it's their fault. This guy is being ridiculous. Like, oh, here he goes again. Like this guy is doing this person. And it's easy to point fingers at somebody else when there's all these people around you. I did it all the time. Like, especially when I was like younger, I was like, oh, like this guy and then this guy. We were like, we both like dated so many people and like almost like dated. And and genuinely like, oh yeah, he just like, you know, if he ghosted me, I never was like, oh, he ghosted me because, you know, I probably did X. I was like, he ghosted me because he don't know what he's missing. And yes, that's true. But also, it is also true that I had some really negative patterns that were affecting relationships. Paulina says dead. So
I know. Because it's true.
And like, that's the thing, is like, we all do this, especially when you're younger. But not even, like even in my marriage, I still have a lot of the same tendencies. And I still, you know, as much as I love to, like, I love self-love and I always want to, like, it's also, I need validation from my husband to the point that I will sometimes like walk around and just kind of like side eye, like give the silent treatment because I assume that my husband just like knows why I'm a little pissy. Like that's not acceptable, but like I still do it, even though I'm always like, I own my body, I own myself. And then in my marriage, some those patterns come back. But again, also in a COVID, in a marriage, you've been forced to sit in a house with your husband or wife or whatever partners, and just like it's like living with somebody for the first time because you're with them all day, every day, you know,
all day, every day. Yeah.
And those like patterns come back.
Yeah. And not even that too. It's just like, when you become like so in tune with someone else, like I'm gonna like kind of maybe revert back to like the last thing you asked me, but I think it's like really easy in this situation to put like a bit of your, not even a bit, like a lot of your self-worth into another person. Okay, so like I hate saying that, but it's true because it's like, well, like that is also a form of external validation, but it's also like a security blanket in a way. So when you're saying like what's the hardest part about like losing things in COVID, like it's also that it's like the security. It's like that was my safe place, that we're not, this is the first time we're going through something like this, and I went through it with that person, and now boom, back, snap, now I'm like alone and I'm navigating this by myself. And then sometimes you think about like, well, that person, like maybe they don't want me, or like I don't want them, or vice versa. And then it's like you lose like a bit of your self-worth sometimes through losing someone like that, relationship or friend, like both.
Totally. And the big thing is like, once like you're kind of out of it, and once like, because right now you're in it and it like it hurts, and once you're out of it and you can kind of look at it like a little bit like a larger scale from a little farther away, you're also like, fuck, those people were a little fucked up, you know what I mean?
I don't
but like so are all of us. I'm not saying
out of it to
I'm saying like all of us like are a little fucked up. So it's like when other people make decisions, it literally isn't about you. So like when a girl, you get ghosted, or when you know a guy or girl just like decides they don't like you and you have that conversation, it's typically like 90% of the time not about you and about them. Whether it's because they actually have boundaries and they're like, listen, this is kind of not what I'm looking for, or they genuinely are just like don't have any self-worth themselves and they're unable to like cope with the relationship. So that's like a major thing. Like I've noticed from like all my past relationships, it was either one or the other. Either these men had amazing boundaries and were literally like, Alyssa, that's unacceptable. And then I was
wouldn't let you
or it was like they just like they didn't have their own self-love. They weren't able to look at their own self-worth. And then of course, when somebody denies us of them, then we think it's our problem. And in reality, it's almost always not. So how have you kind of worked through this breakup?
Through like what? Sorry, exactly.
Like how have you worked through like not feeling enough?
Oh, well, like here's the good thing about where I'm at now today as a woman is like I fucking know. So I wouldn't really say I've had to like work at, you know, I'd say like more so when I was younger, I feel like I put my self-worth into like other people and external validation and them wanting me or being desirable. Whereas like now I don't know if I've done a lot of work on that. I think I've done more work on like my boundaries as opposed to, you know, like gaining back any like self-worth, because I feel like I have retained it thus far. Yeah.
And honestly, boundaries were so hard for me. Like I had a full boundaries guru that I followed. Like I listened to her podcast every day because I had the hardest time. And my patterns with relationships really came in work, where I continuously was like, I felt like a victim. I felt like, why is my boss yelling at me? I thought I was doing so well, or, you know, why did I have this really hard conversation? When in reality, you know, I would just say yes to everything because I'm a people pleaser, but that just doesn't work. So for me, I kind of took those boundaries that I worked in the work, like I learned in the workplace, and brought them into relationships. And that's like the truth. So with me, like, you know, in my course that you are taking in January with me, which I'm so excited about, one of my modules and one of my principles is about boundaries. And we talk about why women kind of are scared of boundaries and how to work your boundaries. So I think one of the major things, because women are so terrified of boundaries because they don't want to seem rude or mean, and kind of like our society has taught us that we're supposed to be, you know, mild-mannered and just, you know, make sure everybody else around us is happy. We're not trained to like set boundaries the way that men are. We're just not. So when a man wants something, they just get it. And when a man doesn't want something, they're like, no, that's not going to work for me. And you can see it in the workplace. The lean in, right? Like men lean in because they've been taught to. Whereas women, we're not taught our boundaries. So what kind of major boundaries did you learn through the ending of relationships this year?
Okay. I think I wrote something down for this.
Okay. And I think, go ahead.
Because this is a hard question for me, because like I haven't really like focused on boundaries or implementing them. Never mind respecting my own boundaries. Okay. Because like when I was young, I had little to none, almost no boundaries.
Me too. I didn't know I was allowed to have boundaries. I didn't know I was allowed to say like, actually, I don't like when you touch me there. Actually, really, I was like, actually, I don't really want, to like you talk to me like that. I was like, if I set boundaries with people, I'll be mean and then people won't like me. That's genuinely like what I thought. And I
Yeah.
guarantee almost all women feel that same way, especially when we're younger.
Yes. So I think like the main point maybe within boundaries is my mom has told me since I like was so young, she was like, you cannot have love without respect. So that goes hand in hand with like love from others and then also love from yourself. So if you're setting a clear boundary with someone and they are crossing it like once repeatedly, they are disrespecting you. Therefore, they do not love you, regardless of what they say. They do not, because you cannot have love without respect. Now, you can respect someone and not love them in a romantic sense, but it doesn't go the other way around. And that is also for yourself. So by setting a boundary and letting someone cross it and cross it again, I'm disrespecting myself. Therefore, I don't love myself.
Yes,
So
bitch!
I'm not I'm not entirely sure if I can pinpoint a specific boundary, but it's like I think the main thing I did like recently and I am proud of myself for is I honored and respected my own boundaries and I knew when it was time to walk away. And I think that that's the thing I'm most proud of. So
Yeah, and me too. I'm very, very proud of you for that.
thank you.
I
It's
got
really
you.
hard
I know.
to respect yourself in that way where it's like, well, you're not, so I have to.
Totally. And I just love you. This was such a good call. Like I'm just like sitting here and I'm like soaking it in. I'm like, fucking right.
Yeah, it's different when you like internally process this stuff and think about it, but then to speak it is also like it's a different thing. Like when I hear myself talk about it out loud, I'm like, like this makes a lot of sense, and I hope that just by speaking about it, like other people can relate. And it doesn't, and again, like it's not even romantic boundaries, it's friendship boundaries, it's family boundaries. Like right now there's a lot going on where you need to protect your own energy and you need to protect your own persona, and like when people are not giving you like that room, then you need to set the boundaries and you need to stick to them.
Totally. And I think
Yeah.
we kind of have talked about boundaries a lot, you and I, just kind of in a conversation. And we talked a
Yeah.
lot about how boundaries aren't taught to us. But we also kind
Yeah.
of talked about how boundaries don't have to be, scary. They don't have to be like, here's the line,
No.
don't cross it. They can be super funny. You're allowed to have boundaries while still being kind. And I think a lot
Yeah.
of people are unable to understand that those things go hand in hand. Again, because we're taught that if we're not people pleasing as women, then we're not doing something right. So
Yeah.
my favorite thing with boundaries is that you can do them in a really fun manner. So I'll tell a little story about boundaries.
I love boundary stories from Melissa.
I had a friend who just like literally couldn't stop talking about her friend who was kind of an asshole. And like literally I was like, okay, this is enough. So I looked at her and I was like, listen, you have 10 minutes to talk to me all about this. I literally can't take any more on. And then we're going to have some fun. And then tomorrow you get another 10 minutes. And it worked really well. Like her and I were like really good connection and we laughed and she's like, fuck, I didn't realize I was like rambling on about this. So like when I say that boundaries don't have to be hard, boundaries don't have to be like, you don't have to sit down with your partner or your friend or your family member and be like, this is the boundary. And if you cross it, I'm dropping you. Boundaries can be just literally being like, listen, I really don't want to talk about this right now. And this is why. Right. And also understanding other people's boundaries. So that's my major thing with, again, boundaries is that they don't have to be as scary as people make them sound to be. Because I think when we talk about boundaries, we think of like a fence. We think of like putting like a concrete wall in front of us and other people. And that's not the case. It's just a gate that you can like close when you feel like it.
Yeah, and like the thing is too is like boundaries aren't necessarily a fence or like a line in the sand. Like they can be flexible. Like no one's perfect. no one can read your mind. So like you can have a boundary and not even voice that boundary, and someone crosses it, and then you're all like, well, how could you do that? But it's like, are you being honest with the people in your life and like actually setting the boundary, and like, oh, like they crossed your boundary once and you tell them like, this really upset me or hurt me or made me feel very uncomfortable, or however it made you feel. And then when you express it, they're like, oh my God, I had no idea I made you feel that way. So it's not like cross this line and you're dead to me. That's like not realistic. But like, I think the main learning with your boundaries is when you voice it and it is repeatedly disrespected and disregarded. That's like the difference between like honoring your own boundaries and like also honoring others. Like if you're repeatedly badgering someone and they're like, back off, like, and you continue to do that, you yourself are not respecting their boundary. Therefore,
Totally.
that's your own choice. And then you're dealt with whatever the repercussions are of that. If you have no
Yeah.
self-control.
And I couldn't have said it. That's exactly what boundaries are. I love it. I think
Maybe I should be teaching this course. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, seriously, on boundaries.
I'm just joking.
Baby, this year you had to develop your boundaries pretty hard, and I'm very proud of you.
Yeah.
This year you are the boundary queen.
I am trying. It's a work in progress. I'm like, honestly, like as much as, if you would have spoke to me a month ago about this, it probably would have been a very different conversation. It would have been like, this was a waste. This year is shit. Like, I am so pissed and like so on and so forth, like very like angry and like defeated. Whereas like the amount of growth I've had happen like in the last 2 months for myself, like is huge. But it comes down to just like setting the principles and like sticking to them. And like, as we know, like I love to write music and songs, and I wrote something down last night that actually just popped into my brain, and it was like, I have to believe these words because they are my own. Woo! So when you are writing,
repeat that.
Repeat that. When I have to believe these words because they're my own. So whatever you are deciding to grow within yourself this year, you believe it. If it's coming from inside of you, like, then it is important. Listen to it. And that is something I was really, really bad at prior to now.
Was listening to your intuition and just like really allowing yourself to trust yourself. Yeah. And why do you think that was? Yeah. Like, where do you think that? Like, what do you think that came from?
I feel like from a young age, I have neglected my emotions because through my life, like, I've had like a lot of loss and a lot of uncertainty and like sickness with my mom. And I was always like, if I let that emotion come up, I literally don't know if I will be able to get control of it. So I've never let that be. And that hindered me through my life and through my relationships because I wouldn't let myself feel that way. Like, I remember like breaking down and like being on the edge of like losing my shit, and I just stopped. And I was like, this isn't me. I don't do this.
Because you're strong, because you're, you're a boss, you don't do this. Like, you're not emotional. You don't let your emotions get the best of you. And I think I think a lot of women think it's either or. Women don't understand that you can be emotional as fuck and then also be strong. Yeah. And the more that we tune into our own emotions and the more we actually pass them, the easier things are to deal with, right? And I think I think almost everyone watching this can understand exactly what that feels like, of just being like, no, I don't want to be vulnerable in front of people. Mm-hmm. I don't want people to think that I'm anything other than strong. But in reality, breaking down and allowing yourself to be vulnerable, like you're doing right now, is like the biggest strength you can do for not only the people around you, but mostly for yourself, right? To actually admit, like, I'm not great. This sucks, but I'm going to be okay.
Yeah. And that's like a big thing. That's a big thing too, is it's like, well, what's the worst that's going to happen if I like break down and cry and like let this person know that like they've hurt me? Like what's the worst thing that's going to happen? They're going to know that they hurt me and hopefully they don't do it again. Like, okay, just because I'm afraid to look weak or I'm afraid to, you know, like let that side of myself come through to somebody else, like that has really hindered me in my life. Like looking back through all my relationships, like friendships and so on and so forth, is the fact that like I'm not in touch with like, or I wasn't in touch with my emotional and like my feminine side, honestly.
Yeah, and kind of like I've talked about before with like completing the stress cycle, it also really physiologically helps us. So if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling anything less than, or you're feeling those quote unquote negative emotions, like the sadness, like the grief, then one of the things you can do is just have a really good cry, and it helps complete the stress cycle. And what that means is your body actually goes from fight or flight. And when you break down and cry, your body realizes that you're okay. Just like, you know, if a lion's chasing you and you're running, obviously you can't cry when you're running because you're in it. But as soon as you're in a safe space and you start crying, your body's like, okay, I can release the garbage. So in crying, you're actually doing your body a huge justice by completing that stress cycle.
Mm-hmm. And I like that's one thing that like I feel like I'm really good at now is completing my stress cycle, you know, like taking care of myself. I know we've talked about this a couple times. You originally sent me being like, I'm gonna ask you like, what's your best coping mechanism in quarantine? And I was like, do you want me to be honest? Because like I was getting blackout drunk like 3 nights a week, like waking up in my clothes, waking up in my makeup, like just a fucking mess, until I was like, okay, like this is self-destructive, like enough. Although I would balance it, like I'd wake up in my clothes and be like, well, time to do a workout, time to go on a walk to like defeat my hangover.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, that is like really like not okay. Like we need to exercise, we need to eat vegetables, like 3 veggies and 2 fruits a day. And like, so I've been really good at making sure I get these good things in, like to, you know, counteract maybe some of the more destructive behavior that I was displaying about a month ago. So,
well, you know, but that's the thing is I think self-love, I think so many people think of it as this thing where you love yourself every day and you're always feeding, nourishing your body and always working out. But in reality, self-love is like allowing yourself to get blackout drunk if you need to for a couple weeks and then being like, this isn't good for me, right? So
okay.
like being able
saying to me like what, maybe 3 weeks ago, you know what, it was at Halloween, you were like, okay, I'm gonna like let you like ride this wave of like getting severely intoxicated, but then like if you're still doing this come like January 1st, like we're gonna have a little reevaluation here. And I was like, okay. And like honestly, like just you saying that, I was like, hey, maybe there's other ways I can deal with my stress. And like also not even just stress, but I think I was just like in the denial phase of like, this isn't happening to me, my whole world is not flipped upside down. And like when I'm like 6 glasses of wine deep, everything feels great, and then you have to sober up and deal with it again. And I didn't want to do that for the first little while. So, and honestly, like I've never been self-destructive.
No, because
like
again,
never.
You're so strong that you kind of been forced your whole life to pick yourself up.
Yeah, like I'm like, I
literally
can't do that because there's people that are depending on me tomorrow. So, and then like kind of in COVID, I was like, nobody needs me to do anything. The only thing I gotta do is wake up and sign in and like work tomorrow.
And like just kind of move your computer, like move your mouse every once in a while.
Yeah, you know how many meetings I was in, and my girlfriends at work would be like, how was your night? Like, how do you feel today? And then I was like, okay, we gotta change this. And I did want to touch on this, as like much as it's like I'm not super proud of that, like that literally was my reality for a while.
And that I'm like really, the one reason why I kind of started this course and started being a lot more active on social media is because I was really tired of seeing this self-love space all about like, love your body every day, like be kind to your body all the time. And like, that's just so unrealistic. And again, we can't always be the best version of ourselves. Like sometimes, like when I was going through really depressive stages, like this is like, 5 years ago, there were like literally just me getting out of the bed and showering was like success. And I think during COVID, we have to look at success differently. And when we're going through major breakups or major life-changing situations, success is different. And by asking you to love your body and love yourself every day and always, again, eat healthy and find great coping mechanisms, makes you feel like you're not, that when you do kind of like just need to take a month of just like binge drinking, as much as like, yeah, sure, it's not the most healthy thing, but like there's no judgment, right? Everyone gets through their garbage in different ways, right? And everyone has their own vices. So I'm not saying that, you know, drinking all the time is the best thing in the world, but if you need to do that and you need to just have a day where you literally eat an entire tub of ice cream, stop hating yourself for that, because you needed that in that moment. And I'm really tired of the self-love space being all about, you know, indefinite, like very black or white, because self-love is gray. And there's days that I am like, I wake up and I'm like, nope, I hate myself. And there's days that I wake up and I'm like, I am literally the coolest person in the world. But self-love is about that middle, right? And like when you're feeling next level, like that's great. But you also understand that the next day could be not great. And I think it's just like really unfair to ask us to always love ourselves, to always be in this space of perfection, this space of my living my best life, this space of I'm the most productive, because it's just not possible. So I love that you touch on, you know, like in the first couple months of your breakup, like you like some alcohol, but like that's not a judgment thing. That's not a bad thing. You know,
I know.
If you needed it and you loved yourself enough to be like, all right, now I'm done this. Let's get healthier. Let's cope healthier way.
Yeah, I was talking to one of my friends actually from work, and we were talking about like self-care can literally look like I made myself a meal today. Like, because I also wasn't eating for a while. I just was like no appetite, nothing. And now I'm, you know, I'm back into like the swing of like, I enjoy like cooking for myself again. And I'm, you know, enjoying my exercise and my walks and, you know, like my friends. It's like, it's small things like that you can do for yourself. And that's like completing a task. Say, I'm going to make my bed. Make your bed. I'm going to shower. It's small things right now. And this isn't even like to do with relationships. It's to do with just like COVID as a whole. Like it's insane. Like people are struggling. And so it's like set a small goal for yourself like every day and just do that to like give yourself a little bit of like stability in your life. I think that helps in all aspects of what's going on right now.
I love it. All right, Coops, last question for you. What is your biggest learning from, I know we kind of touched on a little bit, like, but what's your biggest learning, and what do you wish you could like tell yourself like the day your relationships ended?
Okay, well, I think my biggest learning would be, like we said, just really coming into like myself and like understanding that the choices that I make like are the right choices for myself. Honoring my choices, my boundaries, my decisions, even though, you know, in the moment they didn't feel right. You know, like when you walk away from something that you love, it's going to hurt, and you can't put a timeline on that. I think that's my biggest learning is like patience. I think I can pinpoint my biggest learning being patience with myself, because, you know, like when I look back, I'm like, you know, maybe I should have done this or that, or maybe I waited like a little too long. Like, no, you do the best you can with the knowledge you have at the time, and you honor your emotions at the time, and you have to honor them even after. So I feel like that's been a big learning for myself, is just, you know, being confident in like where I'm at and like what I'm doing and what I did to get here, in like through multiple relationships, because I came off like a pretty hard relationship going into the last one too. And like even dealing with, I think, both of those kind of simultaneously is like what's been going on with me, is dealing with the hurt that I didn't process last time because I had the opportunity to not deal with it.
Yeah, because
again,
this time, like, in typical times, I always say the best way to get over one guy is get under another. But we can't
Yes.
now. And it's not always the most productive for us.
No, because then this is this cycle again. So I'm like, I'm at the point now where I'm like, I don't want to do this again. So what do I need to heal in order to, get what I want out of my life? Not just a partner, but like, what do I really, really want to have achieved before I leave this earth? And it's not what I have been doing. Like lots of things I'm very proud of, some things I'm not. Like we're a work in progress. So I think my biggest my biggest learning would be just like patience with yourself and like your journey to where you want to be and who you want to be with and what you want to do. Work. What is work anymore? What do you really want to do with your time? I think when you're forced to restart and rebuild, it's a blessing in disguise sometimes. So
I love it.
that's maybe the learning.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Michaela. Thank you for being so vulnerable. And again, I know that there's people out here who's going to be watching this who are going through the same thing, and you are going to help a lot. So thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for opening up. And I love you.
I love you. Thank you so much for letting me do this. I hope that everybody stays strong through the rest of, the next 4 weeks and beyond. So, and of course, Alyssa, you're always open to DMs and stuff, and like, so am I.
Yeah. Give us a message.
Anytime. Yeah.
Yeah. If you have any questions about finding your self-love, like in general, or finding your self-love in a breakup, Michaela is going to be awesome. So, and again, I'm going to leave you with one quote that I love. You can be both a work in progress and a masterpiece at the same time. So remember that.
Love that.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in too. Bye.